why he went into a sanitarium, but in those days the odds were tuberculosis. Nonetheless, he never came out of the sanitarium. That was the end of Herzl. And without proof, but a lot of circumstantial evidence, the father of Zionism was murdered.
Real quick, is he, I mean, that's obviously considered the father of Zionism in all the history books and stuff like that. There was some question, if I understood right, that he actually wasn't even the guy that wrote the book about that.
Yeah, there's real problems. Herzl claimed he wrote the Judenstaat, the Jewish state, while he was in Paris. What was the year, 1891 or something? Neither here nor there. He was not in Paris when he claimed he wrote the book in Paris. There are lots of problems. He was not a very good writer before he wrote this book. And by the way, you can only find text messages of entire plays that he wrote before he wrote the Judenstaat. That also disappeared from Jewish history, but he was known to be a pretty bad writer, and the Judenstaat is brilliant. So we can guess that he was chosen because he was handsome and charismatic and all kinds of other reasons, but that's irrelevant. More to the point was he didn't want a war over Palestine. Okay. But you got the war. Well, in 1914, the British declared war on Germany and Turkey, and 20 million people died. And in 1917, diverting like 1 million troops, badly needed troops from Europe, the British took the Middle East, and Allenby walked into Jerusalem. And as Allenby walked into Jerusalem, well, you had Arthur Balfour sending a letter to Lord Lionel Rothschild, looking with favor upon the establishment of a Jewish homeland in their historical land, and that's it. That's the beginning of official. Well, that's really the official beginning of Israel, is when the British captured Jerusalem in 1917, and their foreign minister, Arthur Balfour, sent a letter to Lionel Rothschild looking with favor on the establishment of, well, they call it Jewish homeland. What it comes down to is the Jewish state was founded, and only 20 million people had to die over this because Herzl was rebuffed in 1896 by Count Wilhelm.
So what was Rothschild's claim to the land of Israel at that point? What was he doing?
Well, I don't think it was necessarily Rothschild, but Rothschild had been building up Israel. The Rothschilds founded the first city in Israel, Rishon LeZion, built the Knesset, and incidentally built that gaudy, scary Illuminati Supreme Court building in Jerusalem with the pyramid and the all-seeing eye and the obelisk, the whole thing. That's all Rothschild money. So their point of view is very straightforward. And by the way, well, straightforward. They wanted a Sabbatean state, and we'll get to that. And they're promoting the Sabbatean state in Israel to this day. But you have to understand, the Rothschild family were not united. It was the French Rothschilds that put up most of the money, and with some British contributions, but it was largely the French branch that built Israel.
So they didn't necessarily have any ties to the British Jewish League or whatever that was called? The people that the British Jews...
The British Israel... Well, what do you mean? The British Israel federations and associations, all of this had tremendous ties to the Rothschilds, but I can't prove it, so I don't say it.
Okay.
Okay, I have no doubt that the whole... Look... Let's carry on while we can carry on.
Okay.
There's so much history that is so misunderstood. Now, I'm going to jump to 1933. You've now got, in Israel, you've now got a community, but it's not very big. The figure was about 600,000, which is still pretty significant, considering, 33, I'd say 40 years ago, there were only a few thousand Jews, secular Jews. There was a large community of religious Jews in Israel, but there were no Zionists 40 years before, and now they're up to about 600,000 people. Now, you have to understand that the Jews in the 19th century were the majority of the population in Palestine, or whatever. That's what it's called now, so we'll live with it. Jerusalem was a majority Jewish by a long shot in the 1850s, same with Sfat and Tiberias, but you didn't have secular Jews. You didn't have people coming back to their land to rebuild the sovereign nation of Israel until, the 1890s is when it began. 1917 is when the British recognized it, and by 1933 there was an amazing 600,000 Jews in Israel, and they cut a deal with the Nazis. The Jewish Agency, under the butcher Chaim Weizmann, cut a deal with the Nazis. They were short of people. By the way, the figure, I take back 600,000. It was 600,000 after the transfer agreement. Now look, this is a real for real agreement between the Jewish Agency representing the only Zionism oh boy, is this complicated. Let's just say that the Jewish Agency under Chaim Weizmann cut a deal with the Nazis. You make life miserable for the Jews and send them to Israel, and there will be no boycotts against the Nazis. There will be we will spend your money. The immigrants will have to buy German goods. We will support the Nazi regime. Just make sure you make life so miserable for the Jews of Germany that they have to come to Israel. That is a summary of the transfer agreement. Go buy my books, go into my website, or Google transfer agreement. I'd rather you read it from me than from someone else, but that's what the Sabbateans did. They cut a deal with the Nazis. And in 1932, 250 Jewish organizations in Germany represented Jews. In 1934, all but one were banned. Labor Zionism was the only Jewish organization allowed in Nazi Germany. The Sabbateans had taken over. Now they were training mostly young German Jews to come to Israel in their training camps. They knew a Holocaust was coming. Chaim Weizmann addressed the World Zionist Congress in 1936, saying when the Holocaust is over, the people remaining will be strong and good for Eretz Yisrael. They were conniving to kill the Jews of Europe with the Nazis so that they could start a new Judaism, Sabbatean Judaism, in Israel, using the seed stock of the German Jews that the Nazis were sending to Israel. Now, something very strange happened in 1939. The British, who were controlling Palestine, blocked all Jews from coming into the country. Germany had sent 70 to 80,000 Jews. That Israel had now become a little German Jewish state with little symphonies and little coffee houses. The whole nature of Israel had changed from 33 to 39, and the British blocked practically all immigration in their famous white paper just as the war broke out. The Jews of Europe were trapped. They had nowhere to go. The British arranged the Holocaust in their own way. The Germans were the triggermen. They had this sadism, the natural ability to kill, which not every people, even in their most dire circumstances, has. Certainly not the Jews. In our very, very long history, committing mass genocide is not part of it. What it comes down to is the Germans prevented any Jew from escaping to, Israel. It was still Palestine, but the Jewish agency were aiding and abetting the Nazis and making sure these nasty religious, right-wing, Polish, Estonian, Hungarian, wherever they were from, they could not even be snuck into Israel because the Jewish agency wouldn't allow it. Now, I've written an awful lot about this, and I've got an awful lot of proof, and it's a whole different story. It's the story of Ben Hecht and the book Perfidy, and the proof that the Jewish agency allowed 800,000 Hungarian Jews to be sent to the gas chamber. It's a long, ugly, horrible story.
Quickly, tell me which books I can find those, and I'll link them in the show notes of this website, all your books at tululu.com. So which books would people look for?
Well, I'll give you two, but there's lots of them there. All right, Perfidy by Ben Hecht. That's a classic. Here are the two classics of what I'm talking about. Perfidy, Ben Hecht. Ben Hecht was a Hollywood screenwriter. He wrote The Front Page. That's his most famous film, but a lot more. And The Transfer Agreement by Edwin Black, former reporter for the Chicago Tribune. Those are the most famous sources of this awful, awful story.
Okay.
It's the betrayal of Jews, of all the Jews, by people claiming to be Jewish, but they're not. They're Sabbatean.
So,
and if you see a lot of Jews in the higher ranks of the classic diplomatic conspiracy center, the CFR, you have to know what I said before. This is controlled by the Sabbateans in ways that I can't begin to describe right now. It's a different topic.
Sure. Well, could you give me a few examples of how it is that, like, the religious Jews would be persecuted by this system?
The settlements in Israel. If you're a religious Jew, an Orthodox Jew, you are. I'm going to give you one example. This week, there were two car accidents outside the settlement of Efrat. One almost killed Daniel Matar. He is the wife and the husband of Nadia Matar, the leading pro-settlement protester. He was almost killed. The next day, Yaakov Citron, whose father almost exposed the whole Rabin assassination. Their family has been under constant siege. Almost died. His friend did die in a car crash, the same spot. If you're religious, and you care about Israel, and you cannot be bribed or corrupted, which, by the way, plenty of them can be. I mean, you have to watch for your life. They've been knocking off the finest free thinkers and rabbis in the religious world to bring forth this so-called peace, this Oslo peace. They have been killing the religious of Israel. But again, even the religious, they can't acknowledge the murders have been so constant. and I've been writing about them for years, and they're so